I am fucking games bleeding all over the fucking screen.
I am also Games, and you're listening to a podcast, a very special podcast, because this one was at a request of a commenter who said you guys should talk about your 3x3s of your favorite games, because I don't exactly know what kind of games you guys like. And we were like, good idea.
We've never really talked about our taste. We've just kind of gone on the assumption that everybody knew what it was and could figure it out via context clues.
I mean, if you watch the live streams, you would probably know,
Sure.
because people ask about our favorite games all the time, and it's very clear what we generally like. But yeah, here on the YouTube channel, well, I think part of it is that initially I wanted this to be kind of just like a faceless conglomerate of people who make game reviews, that like it was never clear who was writing or doing whatever on each video. But at this point, we're doing a podcast show, so we might as well. I guess we'll dive right in. Do you want to go first, or should I go first? There's only one thing that's on both of our lists, so we could start with Mass Effect.
Yeah, let's do that.
So, yeah, I particularly wrote down Mass Effect 2, though I would say 1 and 2, you can't really have 2 without 1. There was a time where I tried to go back, because I played these in 2012. I played through the trilogy. So it's been a while. It's not like they're all fresh in my mind. I tried to go back and play just Mass Effect 2, because I wanted to confirm that it was like the one I would put on my favorites list. And I quickly realized that without having played through 1 recently enough to like remember what was going on, it really starts very in media res. It doesn't like remind you of the characters and everything. You're meant to kind of go find them and recruit them. And so like I felt like I was just dropped in and I didn't really care about what was going on.
Right.
Because, last time I had just come off the heels of playing the first game.
That's how I played them as well, because I played 1 and 2. I pirated them, and then I remember thinking, oh, this is like my favorite game. So I immediately went, because like this was right before 3 dropped, and I like pre-ordered like the legendary like high-end Mass Effect 3 edition and all that shit. I specifically put Mass Effect 1, even though I really like 2 and 3, because 2 and 3 you can romance Tali and she's my space wife for life, and you can't in this one. But I feel like Mass Effect 1 is still like the most complete package. Like it has like a very good self-contained story. Like the story with Saren and Sovereign felt the most like standalone-ish. Like you finished Mass Effect 1 and there was more to it, but it was satisfying at the conclusion in and of itself. And I felt that Saren was like a good standalone antagonist that had like a full arc. And it was the most RPG. Like there was loot and you could like really get like armor and weapons and all that kind of stuff, whereas 2 and 3 started to streamline that and there was much less of that. The gameplay in 1 doesn't age very well.
Yeah.
So if you're playing it as more of a shooter,
it's
why hard to go back to
put it as my favorite, because I wrote a review of Mass Effect on my blog way back. If you go to myswordisuunbelievablydull.wordpress.com and search Mass Effect review, you'll find it. But my biggest complaints were, first of all, I didn't find the whole planet exploration thing very fun. I know there are some people who legitimately like taking the Mako and driving all over a planet, but for the most part, it's just like drive around until you find this shooting gallery, and then it's like the same shooting gallery every time. And in Mass Effect 1, it is very easy to stand in the entrance of a room and kill every enemy. Like, you don't even have to take cover, you don't even have to move, basically. Like, you can just stay in one place, kill everything that comes at you once you're like at a certain power level. I also think that the pacing of that game is weird, because I think it expects you to basically, as soon as you can leave the God damn it, what's the main
Citadel?
The Citadel. As soon as you can leave, to go leave. And I did not do that. I completed everything you could do on the Citadel the first time I was there, and then started going to the other places, and then I was really disappointed that like new shit did not unlock at the Citadel very often. Like there was maybe a couple new missions. So like, because the Citadel was my favorite thing about that game, is like seeing how all of these different alien species, like how they all intermingle with each other, the interpersonal conflicts on the Citadel, and just it was such a cool location. Whereas the actual, like, levels where you're just fighting enemies and playing through were, like, a little too long and not that engaging because the combat's not that good. Mass Effect 2, I felt like it cut everything into more segments. It was like, hey, there's not just the Citadel, but there's also this other ship that you're going to be on at, like, 2 different parts in the game. And then, like, combat sections will be more like crafted shooting
like set pieces.
Areas. Yeah. Set pieces, but without being like Mass Effect 3, where it became too set piece-y for me. Because I hate, like, scripted sequences in games. That shit drives me crazy. Or, like, when it takes control away from you for no fucking reason. Like, in Mass Effect 3, there'll be all these moments where, like, your character just has to, like, slide down a little slope, and it's like you just lose control for a minute so your character can slide down a slope. And I'm like, that's not cool. I don't, like, nothing about what you just showed me was interesting or engaging. It just took control away from me to show me a guy sliding down a slope. I don't give a shit, you know? Mm-hmm. So, like, 3, even though 3 I think has the best combat, but I played on PC, and there was no controller support. So,
yeah, I played on PC really difficult. As well. I guess I don't remember the controls super bothering me, but my first run I played Sentinel, which is mostly like stop and pop.
Yeah.
Which might have been easier on PC controls because you're just behind cover, you're throwing like biotics and stuff, and you have like armor. It was cool. I think for me, 2's not my least favorite. I think narrative wise and character wise, it's the strongest by far. You know, like all the loyalty missions were fucking amazing.
Yeah, that's what I love about 2 is the characterization, and that I also love that it's a lot more gritty and pulpy, because the first one is like very clean Star Trek-esque sci-fi, where it's like, you know, stuffy people in boardrooms talking about like space politics, and that's cool. But the second game, like, you go to like the trashy version of the Citadel.
Because now you're working for Cerberus, and you go meet Arya.
Right, Arya, the like, gang leaders and shit. And I'm a big fan of that, like, gangster aesthetic. Like, you know, I like the rough and tumble, rowdy fuckboys kind of shit. Like, so it was cool to. Again, I don't think it has as much impact unless you've played the first game. So, like, I do think you kind of need Mass Effect 1 to make Mass Effect 2 as good as it is. And, like, the main thing about Mass Effect that makes it great is the universe, the level of depth, the level at which you can just run around and talk to people and learn all this shit about this huge universe and what's going on in it. And how just cool looking and good that stuff all is. And then, like, Mass Effect 3, you know, while it does have... There's a lot of good things about that game. It's gorgeous to look at. It has really great conclusions to some of the major character arcs. But, like, I just found it to be incredibly fucking frustrating in no shortage of ways.
The biggest frustration for me with Mass Effect 3 was forcing the multiplayer on you. And then realizing that it didn't actually force the multiplayer on you because it was completely inconsequential. Because you had that readiness meter throughout the game, and like the way to level it up was to go play multiplayer matches.
Oh, is that true? I didn't know that.
And it has very little impact on the actual game because, of course, the ending has no impact on anything at all. No. So it was kind of dumb in that way. And then, like, the fucking weird ninja guy was kind of...
The ninja guy was the worst thing I've ever seen. That character was fucking terrible.
All of like... the elusive man and just Cerberus kind of jumps the shark in 3.
Yeah, and like in Mass Effect 2, I really enjoyed going to all of the extra planets and random side missions because instead of, you know, driving the Mako around and doing all that shit, it was more like each one was just a side mission, like a crafted side mission that was usually interesting. Sure, there were a lot of them still that were like kind of the same, but there were some that were really radically different that were like nothing else you had done. Like there's one where you're just like navigating. I remember there's like you land on this station that's like falling apart, and it's basically just like, be careful because this thing is going to fall out from under you. And it was just like a weird, mysterious moment that was like nothing else in the game. And I think that added a lot of breadth to the type of experience that you had. In 3, there was this mechanic where you weirdly have to like overhear conversations in the Citadel in order to pick up missions. And that drove me insane because like this is a game that doesn't often have music or anything really going on audially, so I'm usually playing music at the same time as I play the game. I'm not going to hear people having conversations because I'm not trying to get as immersed, I guess, as they want me to.
I guess I didn't have that problem because I never listen to music while playing video games. I'm always like, I'm playing the video game. So I was able to pick up... It was interesting because I felt that mechanic was kind of like a way... Because the whole like feeling of Mass Effect 3 is like this sense of like overwhelming kind of like... Not dread, but just like you're being stretched way too far. Like that's clearly the theme of the entire game. Like you're having like these weird like nightmare dreams throughout the whole thing, and they're just... The weight of like the entire universe is on your shoulders.
I bet I would relate to that a lot more now that I'm like, because at the time I had not lived as an adult yet.
Sure.
You know, I was an adult, but I had not lived as an adult yet. I mean, I was working. It was during the time I was working at Target, but what's most important to me about the Mass Effect games is that like I was not interested at all in political sci-fi until Mass Effect. Like, literally, I thought, like, space was boring. I thought politics were boring. I didn't really care about sci-fi stuff. And then I think just because my friend Ghost Lightning, who's sort of my mentor, that was his favorite games, I think I just checked it out for that reason and was like, oh my god, this plot-driven games can be interesting.
Right, yeah. I mean, I was already like big into the genre because I'm a huge fan of Star Trek and Babylon 5 and all that shit. So when like this was like, oh, you get to play Babylon 5, I'm like, sign me the fuck up. Let's do this.
All right, well, we should probably move on because we have to talk about all of our favorite games here.
Yeah, shit.
And I think that was the only one that's on both of our lists.
Probably.
So I compacted franchises on mine because if I didn't, then the Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and Dark Souls 3 combination would have taken up half of my 3x3. And I can't really pick a favorite because each one is interesting for different reasons. So with Demon Souls, and I didn't play any of these when they first released, but my friends were super into them right from the get-go. Like Demon Souls, day one of release, my friends were playing it at my house. So like I've been there watching it the whole time. And the main intrigue of Demon Souls was that it was this really mysterious, freaky, weird, Lovecraftian type of game where you really see a huge variety of environments that are all like mysterious and creepy for different reasons, and I think that's the biggest strength of that game over the ones that come later. Some of the mechanics were not as tight as what you would then get in Dark Souls, and then Dark Souls also had the open world, and so Dark Souls is definitely the most memorable because it has this huge, insanely interconnected open world that you can play through so many different ways. Every single time you play the game, you could take a totally different path, you could build a totally different character, and they're all kind of equally interesting. And like it's so endlessly deep that for being an action game, for being what plays like for the most part a straightforward hack and slash game, that feels really good to me. I just like to level up a gigantic sword, whack enemies really hard with it, and make them dead. And like the environmental storytelling is really incredible. But Demon Souls or Dark Souls 1, I do think it has... I don't know if I'd say it has issues, but like I do think that the later games polished things a little bit more. Bloodborne has the most exciting combat. It has unbelievably beautiful visuals. The only problem with it is that it gets pretty samey. Like, you mostly are in the same types of very dark locations. It all takes place sort of at night, and like... it's not as memorable on a moment-to-moment basis. You don't have the same level of like discovering some really out there location that you couldn't believe was real. Like in Dark Souls, if you were to find Ash Lake, you'd be like, oh my fucking god, I can't believe this is here. Bloodborne doesn't quite have anything that magical, but as a straightforward gaming experience, it's really fun. And like playing it for the first time and realizing the slow drift from Van Helsing to H.P. Lovecraft is really cool. And then you got Dark Souls 3, which is probably, if I had to pick my favorite, because it has the mechanical depth of Dark Souls. It has the incredible visuals with tons of variety. The only problem with the Dark Souls 3 is that it's not as open-ended. It's not as, like, every time you play it you can have a different experience. But the experience you do have is, I think, the most memorable. It has the coolest bosses. It has the best graphics. It has the most memorable environments. The fucking church level, cathedral, is, like, one of my favorite levels in any video game. So, yeah, I would probably say, if I had to pick one, Dark Souls 3, but all 4 of these would take up slots on my favorites list. What's your next one?
Let's see. Let's go with Deus Ex Human Revolution.
Hell yeah.
That game fucking blew my mind to shit. Transhumanism, H+. That is my bread and butter. That is what I want. I want it to be 2027 so I can finally get my robot body and get addicted to neuropazine. It's fine. I'll take the addiction. Let's do it. It's worth it. I want swords in my arms really bad.
What are you gonna do with the swords in your arms?
Dude, I don't fucking know. Like, cut up meat or something. I don't...
Just be an internet
I'll just get, like, little knives in my fingers for, like, cooking and shit. You know?
give a new definition to I am the bone of my sword.
Yeah, exactly. It's fucking beautiful. Like, the aesthetic, the vision of the future they craft in Deus Ex Human Revolution is just, like, really interesting. It's this weird, like, cyberpunk blending with, like, Victorian kind of, like, Renaissance style of aesthetic, because it's trying to, like, you know, it's the new Renaissance of this transhumanism kind of experience sort of shit. It's fucking crazy to look at. I liked the yellow. I thought that was a cool aesthetic choice. Kind of disappointed that they toned it down a lot in the sequel and made it more kind of gritty, realistic kind of looking. Thought that was kind of a missed opportunity. But just the breadth of choice it gave you. Like, I know it's not as in-depth as, like, the original Deus Ex. I haven't played that yet on my to-do list. But just compared to its contemporaries, even now, like, the options the game allows you to approach any task from multiple different angles and being able to play that game very differently on multiple playthroughs, and just having so many skills and options available to you that you can really cater your playstyle and how you approach things. You know, like, one of the coolest moments in the entire game for me where it's like, yeah, this is the best thing ever, because I was playing a stealth build for the most part, and there's this one point, like, halfway through the game where you're infiltrating, like, an enemy base, and there's all these, like, robots. There's this huge army of, like, dudes just standing there, and it just, like, puts you in a room in front of them before you go in there, and it just gives you a rocket launcher. It's like, here's a rocket launcher.
Yeah.
You can go ham and just fight all these guys. But I'm like, no, I'm resisting the temptation of, like, picking up this giant fucking rocket launcher. So I just go through the entire room and just go about it just such a way that I dodge everybody. Nobody sees me. I get into the elevator and it's like, Ghost, 15,000 experience. I get, like, a level instantly, and you just go down.
Even bigger cum.
It's like the biggest cum in games. Because it's just,
pretty great.
It was fucking incredible. And there's tons of moments like that. And I played the game later, and I got the rocket launcher, and you can go apeshit and have this cool, huge firefight there. So it's just like, both of those options are equally rewarding, because even just moving, like, as someone who plays a lot of, like, classic Metal Gear and stuff, like, what I always kind of found frustrating with Metal Gear Solid, especially, like, 1, 2, and 3, is that, like, the base mechanics, they're not limiting. There's a lot of stuff you can do with them, but it feels kind of stiff. And Deus Ex, like, even with the stealth stuff, it feels much more, I don't want to say forgiving. Why the fuck won't these sounds turn off? I muted everything, you fucking assholes. It just feels really good. Like, the mechanics are easy to get into, but there's a lot to master with it. The stealth kills feel good. I don't know. And just, like, the story and the lore and everything, it's just, it's a fantastic fucking game.
I think that would probably be either on my list or close to it had I actually beaten Human Revolution, but I like it for a lot of the same reasons as Mass Effect, that you can go around and just, like, analyze so much random data that all informs the world and story. It's really cool. I love games that have just, like, ass loads of things optional things to read. I hate being forced into a cutscene. Like, I don't want to watch a 20-minute cutscene, but I will read a shitload of random codex on my own time. You know?
I think the cool thing even is like when the game forces you into some of those cutscenes, because there are regular cutscenes, but the most important cutscenes in the game are gameplay. Because a lot of the cutscenes, like near the end, there's a cutscene where you're talking to the guy, like the big bad of the whole game, and it's still gameplay. Like you're making dialogue choices and you're like looking at his responses, like with one of your OGs to your statements, and you can like get a thing that it's like called a social analyzer, and it tells you what people's personality types are. So you try and pick answers that will like affect them psychologically based on their triggers, and you can avoid huge consequences by talking them off the ledge instead of having them do all this crazy shit. And most of the big cutscenes in the game are interactive like that.
It's really cool. All right, well, the next up on my list is another compounding of a franchise, which is the Zelda boys. Ocarina of Time is my favorite, in large part because I grew up with it. I've watched people play it multiple times. I've played it at least twice, probably. But, it was the first game I ever saw that had a story, really. Because when I was like a kid, I got into gaming with the N64, and I played like Diddy Kong Racing and shit. And like, we had rented Zelda one time and couldn't get out of Kokiri Village because we didn't know that games would ever involve reading. Like, by we, I mean me and my little brother. So eventually I watched my cousin play through it, and like, the cutscenes felt like full feature films to me. Like, they were so long and involving, which of course they're not. They're like 5 minutes long. But like, it blew my fucking mind as a kid, and I can still return to it, and all of the temples and bosses are all just so memorable to me. Like, I know that a lot of them are pretty basic, so if you play it for the first time today as an adult, you might be unimpressed. But like, to me, every single part of the game is super memorable because it's all baked into my mind. And like, I feel like the game is just the right size where when you play the classic 2D Zeldas, almost all of which are good. Like, I like the original game. A Link to the Past is good. The Game Boy games are good. Almost all of them have this same kind of feeling that you can always go back through the overworld and go back to places you've been and find new things, and it's fun to do that. It's fun to take your new items and run around and see what they can affect now. I think that after Ocarina of Time, the 3D games tended to get so big that you didn't want to do that as much. And granted, I've also got the Wind Waker on here, which is possibly the biggest one in terms of sheer land size, but it's also very different in that it's not so much of a test every new item you get on every single surface of the world type of game, as it is just a sail around and see what you discover. My biggest complaint with Wind Waker is simply that too many of the islands are basically the same. But, I've got a full review of the Wind Waker that I did on my main channel, on Digibro. If you just search Wind Waker HD review Digibro, you'll probably get it. And then the Minish Cap for the GBA, I think, is the most underrated Zelda game, because it is, first of all, it has probably my favorite visual aesthetic of all the 2D Zeldas. It's very bright and poppy, and it's similar to Wind Waker, but not quite the same. And it is just very densely packed. Like, with what I was saying, that my favorite thing about the Zeldas is testing everything on everything else in the world, Minish Cap invites that the most, where it has this system where you pick up these shards of like a amulet or something, and other people in the world will have the other half of these amulets. And so if you give a character like the half that you have, it will unlock something in the world. And you'll see these moments where, like, areas that you've traveled through multiple times, like, you'll see a cutscene of what happens when you finish this amulet and something changes there that was totally unexpected. And there were moments like that that were like breathtaking to me in that game, where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe there was a thing there. And then I go there and I'm all excited, I also am a huge fan of just the shrinking mechanic in, like, I'm a huge fan of that concept because, again, I really love density in anything, in any media. You're going to see this come up on my list multiple times. Obviously, the Soul series is also very dense, but, like, just the idea that in a small space there's still so much going on. And so in Minish Cap, it's like the world already isn't that large, but then you shrink down to a smaller size and you realize there's this second hidden world sort of baked into the world that's already there. And it's like there's two layers of this world. And you know, Zelda usually conveys the idea of two layers of the world by having either like you age up and age down, or Dark World, Light World. I think that's all way less interesting than the Minish Cap's approach to that. But yeah, Zelda, I like it. Not as big of a fan of the newer 3D Zeldas that are like really fucking huge and expansive. Like, I haven't actually played Breath of the Wild yet, but I've watched a lot of gameplay of it, and it looks totally uninteresting to me. It doesn't look like it has much of what I care about from Zelda. You know, again, density over giganticness, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
So what do you got next?
Next, I believe, is Devil May Cry. I mean, I could talk about the entire fucking franchise. I picked the first one just because it was the first one I played.
And you've played it like 100+ times.
Easily 100+ times. Probably 200. Like,
I mean, if you guys go to the playlist tab on this channel where we upload all the streams, I don't know how many people know this, who watch this, who are like, if you just watch the YouTube channel, do you even know that the playlist tab contains all of the live streams that we've done?
Yeah.
There's you playing through Devil May Cry in 2 hours in one of them.
Yeah.
So
we
check
did,
that
we
out.
did the whole in one shot. It's just, I don't know, it was one of those games that changed my entire perception of what games could be. And like to this day, Devil May Cry 1 is the gold standard of just like, this is what an action game should be in my mind. Mm-hmm. And so when you give me an action game, it's like I want it to be like this, because nothing has ever come close to being this fucking good and this satisfying. And the entire series is really great. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. I really like Devil May Cry 1 just because like the tone is different than the rest of them, because this was the one by Hideki Kamiya that started as Resident Evil 4. So like it had that sense of like swagger and badassness to it, but it was a lot more subtly played, I think, because the series didn't have its identity yet, and like it didn't lean into it as much as 3 and 4 does.
If you just looked at it from a distance, it looks like a horror game.
Yeah, like that's the whole thing. Like it's basically like you're in Resident Evil, but you're a badass now. So all the things that would have scared you kind of just excite you now because you're equipped to handle them. Whereas if you're playing as like Leon in Resident Evil 2, like you'd be shitting your pants in this situation. Yeah. So it kind of like, it's really interesting in that way because it's more subtle. Whereas you play something like Devil May Cry 3 and like the first level, you're surfing on a fucking rocket, you know? So it's like tonally very different. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed everything about that game. Just the way combat feels, the viscerality of all the hits.
Do you think that the shortness contributes to it?
Maybe.
Because all the other games are like longer, and I feel like there's this fixation in modern gaming that like every game needs to reach a certain kind of length. And personally, I like games that I can beat in one sitting, because I am way more likely to, like, it's more fun to play a game that way to me. Like, hey, I'm just going to take the afternoon and blast through Devil May Cry again, you know?
I mean, that's probably why I've been able to do it so many times. Yeah. I've just, you know, been able to whittle down my playtime. And I mean, I'm not nearly as good as I used to be. I used to be able to, like, play hard mode like it wasn't even a problem, and, like, get on to, like, the difficulty before Dante Must Die. I was like able to play that pretty well. Now I can't. But it's just something I really appreciated about that game compared to something like 3 is that it felt like more gory, I guess, because like one of the weird things in Devil May Cry 3 is that all the enemies, when you hit them, they kind of like spew out sand and shit, and it's very weird. It feels like less visceral, whereas like even when you're stabbing like puppets, which are just wood, which probably should spew out something like sand, there's blood and gore and shit, and everything just feels way more visceral in that game. And I don't know, it's just perfect. There's like nothing about that game I don't like. The only thing I wish Devil May Cry 1 had was more of like the combo juggling you can do and stuff like 3 and 4. That's really where, like, 4 I think is probably my favorite playstyle wise, because I really liked Nero even more than Dante and all his styles. I liked being able to use the Devil Bringer to like grapple guys and keep combos going and like juggle guys in the air. It was a bit more noob friendly, I guess, being able to like control placement a lot more easily, being able to bring guys to you or move over to them. Devil May Cry's the fucking best.
Do you think from the demo of 5 that it has potential to be your new favorite?
Yeah. I mean, all the things that I liked about Nero in 4 have been retained in 5. The grapples, the devil breakers. So, depending on... Because like, there's still a bunch of arms that we haven't used yet. And V could suck. And that could be a third of the game. And a third of the game could be shit. But... Yeah, Nero plays just as well in 5 as he does in 4, and I'm not worried about that part at all.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, next up on my list is my favorite multiplayer game of all time. My favorite couch multiplayer game of all time. Phantasy Star Online.
Yeah.
Which is intended to be an online game. I've never played it that way. I mean, I think by the time I discovered it, the servers were probably down on the original.
The same for me.
I had it on GameCube, and the thing is that you can play it split-screen multiplayer, and I have 2 little brothers who at the time were just old enough to play video games with me, and we usually had a friend around, so we would play 4-screen multiplayer of this all the fucking time. And Phantasy Star Online is fascinating because it's very pure. And what I mean by this is that, like, most MMORPGs, especially in the West, are driven by quests, where you take quests from people and then you go complete those quests and you level up and you follow a quest line and there's like a story. But traditional MMOs in like Korea and Japan are often just about grinding. It's not even about doing quests. And granted, Phantasy Star Online, if you played it online, it did have a quest system. And if you played single player, then it was basically a story-driven game that's just questing. Like, it's the same levels as multiplayer, but there's more narrative elements and you pick up quests and do them. But if you played this couch multiplayer style, it's just grinding. You just go to a level, you fight all the enemies in that level until you've cleared the level, you pick up all the items, and you go to the next level. And if you can't beat the boss, then you just play through the 2 levels you just did again until you can do it. And so, me and my friends would just play this game endlessly, and you have collaborative elements in that. Like, you can have somebody in the party who's a mage healer, give them your mono fluids, they give you mono mates, so they're always healing their TP, you're always healing your HP. Like, just somebody has to be kind of a tank, which it's funny because historically I always just played a high damage output characters. Like, I was usually a mage and my brother was usually a warrior. I never realized how much, like, tanking and aggro control you actually have to do as a warrior until I started playing with my fiance, and she was playing as a ranged character, and I was like, oh, I have to actually, like, keep you alive. Like, I didn't realize what my brother had been doing for me all these years. But yeah, like, it's just a pure go in and kill enemies type of game, but it's got... First of all, I really love the aesthetic of the game, even though, like, graphically it is pretty ugly. It is not aged well. We're talking about Phantasy Star Online 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean, this was originally for the Dreamcast. So,
yeah.
And it looks like it.
But it has a really cool aesthetic and really amazing music. It's very distinctive. I don't think there's any other game with a soundtrack that sounds like Phantasy Stars. But they, everything about it is very ingrained into my memory because I spent so much time playing this with my friends growing up. But, like, I think the most important thing about it is that there's never really been another couch MMO in this style. It's most comparable to, like, Gauntlet. If you ever played Gauntlet Dark Legacy or Gauntlet Legends with some friends, it's kind of like that. But the thing is that Gauntlet is not very tightly crafted. Like, it's got very clumsy game design, and it's a bit more frustrating, and Phantasy Star feels extremely well planned out. Like, everything makes sense in the game. You never feel like anything bullshit happens to you in Phantasy Star Online. And it can get really hard, and if you're playing through episodes 1 and 2, that's a very long campaign, and, like, trying to beat the final boss is difficult, and then you can go up to hard mode and just keep going and going and going, and, like, it doesn't radically change as an experience, but every time you make it to another level, you feel a huge sense of accomplishment, because it's it's not easy. You know, it's not like you just skate through each level. It's like sometimes you might make it to Mines 3 and get your ass kicked and be like, fuck, we might have to go play through the whole forest again and like play through every single stage again before we're really ready to continue. It does have one big flaw as a multiplayer game, which is that in order for you to, like, if you were to start up playing on 2-player after having beaten the dragon boss that lets you go to the next area, if you stop playing and then you start again, you will have to start the whole game over unless someone in the party has beaten the dragon on single-player mode. So it does kind of require you to take your character and go play single player, but you play it with the same character. So you can grind on single player mode and then play multiplayer with your friends using the same character, which is really cool. It also has another flaw in that it is, if you do not quit game properly, it will fuck up your save.
Ugh.
And we have lost many characters to, like, you know, power outage. Your characters are probably gone, you know? So, like, that's a huge fucking problem. But nonetheless, I've returned to the game so many times to so many different people, and it's always a ton of fun to, like, sit down some new friend and be like, look, we're going to play this game. Like, you explain to them the mechanics, watch them get into the groove, and then you're just like, by the time you get to the point where they understand the game, you're already hooked and addicted, you know? And you want to see what's going to be behind the next door. Like, oh, what if we clear this area? What's going to be the next area? So yeah, I'm a really big fan. Phantasy Star Online 2 on PC is also great, and it has much more modern, like, combat controls. It's a lot faster. It's a lot more, like, it's a lot more of a fun action game. The only problem is you can't play it couch co-op. You have to play it online. And, like, me and my brothers have, you know, played it, LAN partied it and shit, basically, but, like, by which I mean put multiple computers in the same room and played together. But, like, there's just such a huge difference between being able to throw on a GameCube game and sit on the couch and grind in an MMO, and then having to, like, you know, have somebody who lives in the same house as you playing it on a different computer in a different room. It's like,
yeah, it's kind of a lost art, the couch co-op shit.
I don't know why. Like, I don't know why.
Gotta get, if you can play games locally, they're not gonna buy Xbox Live.
Yeah,
there's
that
$50 a year.
Return on investment for them. It's really sad because it makes you. I think a lot of people just have convinced themselves that this happened because not enough people play couch co-op, and it's like, that's not the case. There's just there's no way to make it more profitable than a single player game to include it. But Phantasy Star Online, accidentally the best couch multiplayer game of all time. IMO. What's next on your list?
Guilty Gear XX, or Guilty Gear X2.
Hell yeah.
That such an interesting story behind this game is that my first Guilty Gear that I played was Guilty Gear Advance for the GBA.
Yeah.
And I bought that just because I was really into Soul Calibur 2 and I wanted a fighting game to play in school when I wasn't able to play Soul Calibur 2. Mm-hmm. So I got this Guilty Gear game because it had a guy with a sword on it. I'm like, well, you have swords in Soul Calibur, so I guess I'll buy this as well because it was like $10 or whatever. And I ended up playing that game way more than Soul Calibur because I thought it was way more fun. The thing about Guilty Gear Advance is that it's a fucking shit port, because how are you going to port
it's
Guilty Gear
game
to the Game Boy? So the sprites are like 7 pixels, and the music sounds like worse than Game Boy Color shit, but it's still like the classic Guilty Gear music. It just sounds like ass. But like the melodies are really catchy. And I was like, okay, well, this is fun. I like playing this game. The combat's cool and stuff. Too bad it looks and sounds like shit. And then at Blockbuster, I found Guilty Gear X2, and I was like, oh, this is like...
Just talking about this has gotten holy orders
a real game. I didn't realize that it was an actual game, so I brought it home, and all of a sudden, all these like shitty tunes are like the fucking heaviest metal shit in my life, and my fucking nuts exploded, and I fucking creamed my pants instantly. I was like, this is the best thing of all time. And there's like all these different fucking modes, and like there's like story modes with branching characters. There's a huge arcade mode. There's Medals of Millionaires. There's like 50 missions with EX modes of characters. I'm like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
And it just was so much.
Guilty Gear X2, it's not Pound Reload. It's Sharp Reload. That was one of my favorites. I had it on the Xbox for some reason. And yeah, it's probably, I couldn't decide my favorite fighting game. There's no fighting games on my list because on the one hand, traditionally I've played about a billion hours of Smash, but I'm kind of sick of Smash, so I didn't want to put that on my list. Melee would be the one I would pick if I did. And then there's Guilty Gear, and like, it's been a while since I've played Pound Reload. I don't like Xrd as much as X2.
No, I mean, I like the visuals and stuff. Like, they did some really cool things with that, and they added some new mechanics. But I just don't like the soundtrack as much. And like, the soundtrack was the lifeblood of the game for me, because it just gets you fucking hype.
As much as I appreciate, and I know you love the 3D models and everything in Xrd, I'm a huge pixel art guy. So like, to me, not having sprites is already like a knock against it, you know? Well, not even necessarily pixel, but just like the hand-drawn aesthetic of X2. Like, X2 had like my favorite fucking art in anything. Like, so to make it into 3D models, it just felt like it lost something in translation. And also, I don't like the new supers and stuff that they put in Xrd, because when I played against my friends who knew how to do that stuff, it was just constant fuckery. It wasn't even fun. But yeah, X2, it's fucking legendary. Like you said, the soundtrack, it instantly in my head as soon as it was mentioned. And there's a huge cast of characters in that game. Yeah. That was another thing that bothered me about Xrd, and I think they've added a lot of them back in Revelator, but like, in Sharp Reload, there was like 25 fucking characters, and they're all super different. Yeah, there's aesthetic.
No like Ken, Ryu, Akuma kind of thing.
No, there's nobody who's normal swaps at all. They're all fucking like crazy, weird, insane, and a lot of them have play styles that you can't even really wrap your mind around at first. You know?
Like, have fun trying to play Eddie right out of the gate.
Or Zappa.
Yeah, it's just, there's some really crazy shit in there. And the game just has so much to offer. There's just so many things. Like, the mission modes are ridiculous. Because, like, there's just 50 missions that will kick your ass. Because, like, the requirements for them are just insane. And you're fighting, like, overpowered EX versions of, like, secret characters you haven't even unlocked the normal versions of yet. And, like, they have recovering HP. And just, like, how the fuck am I supposed to win these things? Yeah. And it just has so much breadth of content. Because, like, X2 for PS2 was not online. This was pre Xbox Live kind of shit. You know, that was the great thing about Sharp Reload, is that it had Xbox Live play, but I didn't have that one because I didn't have an Xbox at the time. So just single player, just playing and, you know, going through the story and like slowly piecing together the lore of that man pre-internet, trying to figure out what the fuck this game was talking about.
I didn't even like, Guilty Gear cutscenes just seemed like incomprehensible nonsense to me as a kid.
I just for some reason, there's something about the world fascinated me, and still does to this day. Just like the crazy, insane lore that Daisuke made up, and just trying to figure it all out was really interesting.
If you're not familiar with Tom Oliver here, there are some people on this channel who just call you the other guy. You did a lecture on the entire story of Guilty Gear. So if you want to know the story of Guilty Gear, go listen to just type Guilty Gear lecture and you'll get it. Yeah. It's pretty fucking fantastic. It's a unbelievably detailed story that makes no fucking sense at all.
Yeah, definitely cost me a bit of sanity putting that together.
Oh, well, no sanity went into creating it, that's for sure.
No.
All right, next on my list is Final Fantasy X. This was probably the most recent edition. I played the HD version on PS4 recently, and like, Final Fantasy X was like the first JRPG I really remember being cognizant of. I saw it at like my dad's friend's house, and it was on the PS2, and the graphics were blistering to my eyeballs. I was like, what in the fuck? How is this possible?
Final Fantasy X was a milestone for sure.
Oh my god, it looked fucking insane. I mean, the cutscenes still look insane.
Yeah.
To this day, and I had not played 7, 8, 9. I didn't know any of them. I had never heard of Final Fantasy until 10. So I looked at that, and it was like mindgasm. But I tried to play it growing up. I had found it was too difficult for me. I couldn't beat the third Seymour fight. Going back to it as an adult, I understood that I guess for me growing up with video games, because I took a very odd path through gaming, I didn't play like a lot of hardcore or classic games. Like most of the games I played were just things that I could get at Babbage's or whatever for like $20. So I played a lot of weird shit and mostly multiplayer games because I always had to play with my little brother. So like I was not used to like having to really think my way through a game and like learn all the mechanics and like really learn what everything does. I was used to just like mash X to victory, and like the only I think I had played Golden Sun by this point. By the time I actually played Final Fantasy X, that game's mega easy. You know, it's very kid friendly. It's not that complicated. It's just use the most powerful attack. Final Fantasy requires you to actually get tactical and to actually like learn all the moves you have and what they can do in different situations and how this particular boss is meant to be approached, because it's not always about just using the most powerful attacks. Sometimes it's about using haste and, you know, keeping your team faster than them, or the placement, like the order of attacks is very important in 10. Like, managing who attacks when is a lot more important than just the damage that the characters will do. So, battling is really interesting and really fun, really tactical for a JRPG. And the story is just really fucking good. It's really interesting, super deep world, like...
Really unique world as well.
Yeah, really unique, like, combination of, like, spirituality and magic that, like, is... It's like, there's, like, a religion, and it's, like, even though the, like, guy who's sort of leading the religion is evil, the religion is real. Like, the thing they believe in is real. The spirituality all affects the world. It's just that there's different people taking different approaches to how they express their, you know, relationship with it, and not everybody understands it completely. They don't necessarily know what's going on with all this shit, because their world is very complicated, and it's sort of built on the ashes of a previous world. And then you've got, you know, the crazy time travel shit with Titus, and more importantly than that, though, all the characters are really interesting, because they all have, like, interconnected backstories, and a lot of them are older. Like, when I play Final Fantasy IX, which I also really love, more of the characters are sort of coming of age, and so it's more about them, like, finding themselves.
Yeah. It's more of a traditional fantasy story.
Yeah. Final Fantasy X is, like, these characters are older, and it's more about them trying to reconcile their relationships with each other. It's more about, like, the things that have happened to them in the past and why they've sort of closed themselves off, and, you know, getting to sort of, you know, find their footing again and, like, pick themselves up from something bad that's happened to them, you know, and, like, and it's a very tragic story, because they're all adventuring knowing that, like, that their autistic princess is going to die,
yeah.
You know, and she's super fun. She's very sweet, Yuna. I think a lot of people probably considered her a Mary Sue, but I don't think she is. I think she's just a very kind autistic girl who needs the guidance of the people around her. But yeah, I think the sphere system's pretty fun to gradually progress your way through and make these major advancements where, like, you finally unlock that big skill, and it's like it will, like, literally change the way you play. Like, getting new skills in Final Fantasy X is a massive advantage. It's not just, like, incrementally getting stronger. It's like your whole tactics will get shaken up by certain new attacks. And then there's the fact that you can have each character basically learn everything. Like, if you wanted to play this game ad infinitum, you can just have every character move through the entire sphere grid. I would never have the gall to do such a thing. And, like, you can create really unique builds. So I know that's why a lot of people keep coming back to the game. The final boss was really fucking hard and required me to grind a lot, and that pissed me off, but I fucking stuck through it, and I did it, and it was really satisfying, and I'm glad. I loved it a whole lot. I was planning to write a book about it at the time, but I didn't do it. But if I Am Games ever becomes a serious enough channel, I will make a 4-hour Final Fantasy X rundown of some sort.
Pretty nuts.
Yeah. All right, what's next on your list?
Mine, I believe, next is Metal Gear Solid, the OG, the original one. This is another one of those games that really just changed what I thought games could be, because I got a PlayStation way later, like by the time the PS2 was out, and I got it from my uncle, because my cousin had 2 PS1s and he was being an asshole or something. So as punishment, he gave me one of his PlayStations.
Amazing.
So like I didn't buy games for it or do anything for like the first 2 weeks I had it because my parents were convinced this wasn't going to stick and they were going to take it back. So I just had this PlayStation sitting in front of me being like, fuck, I really want to play some fucking games. Because I always wanted a PlayStation.
Access to like the biggest library of
and
games ever.
Just can't. And like I'm just here with my N64 and my Dreamcast. I'd only played like kid games. Like before this, like I was Sonic Adventure 2 was my jam, and like Star Fox and Banjo-Kazooie. Like those are the kinds of games I was playing. And then like all of a sudden I had like the adult console now. I'm like, oh, let's play some Metal Gear Solid. I heard that was good. And just the fact that like there's a story and like characters and like violence and like just treating the medium of games as a place to tell a story and develop characters and talk about themes. It's like, holy fucking shit. Yeah. And just the way everything was so cinematically presented. It didn't even matter that the graphics looked way worse than any of the other consoles I had. Yeah. Just, it made up for it in raw presentation and just presenting games in a way I'd never played before. And even to this day, I feel like the original really is just a fucking masterpiece in the way that everything's kind of played out and how it balances this sense of like just like serious kind of like storytelling, but also crazy bombastic over the top action and like injects enough levity and like doesn't take itself too seriously. It's like, oh well, you got to find Meryl by looking at her ass, you know? Yeah. And just like cute little things like that would never fly today, but like are totally like representative of games at the time. Mm-hmm. It's just a masterpiece.
Well, there's a lot of long analytical videos about that game if you want to hear more. Yeah. We don't need to be the ones to tell you about it.
I'm sure everybody knows at this point.
Yeah. Interesting, though, that the first one is still your favorite.
Yeah, 3 comes pretty close. I really like the story. I mean, they're all great. Like, Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of those...
Wait, are they all great? Do you like 5?
5? No, 5's not great. 5 doesn't even exist. It's not real. It's a weird fan fiction.
How do you feel about 4?
I like 4.
Okay.
I thought it was... Because, like, a lot of people, I remember, were pissed off, like, oh, Snake's old and shit. I'm like, yeah, but, like, that's kind of the point, you know? Like, there was
I think that's not the main reason people hate or get mad at 4. I think it's all the retcons and the crazy shit.
Yeah, I mean... Once you get to Metal Gear Solid 4, the story is so fucking crazy that it seems to start getting, like, super pissed off about retcons almost seems, like, missing the forest for the trees at that point. Yeah. Like, there's so many cool things going on in 4 at the same time as well. That, like, for me, playing Metal Gear Solid 4 was just, like, this is, like, the end of this story. The fucking... We jumped the shark way the fuck long ago, so let's just fucking enjoy this for what it is. Yeah. You know? Like, Metal Gear Solid 3 seemed like a good place to stop as well, because it, like, kind of gave us, like, a bit of hint into, like, okay, this is who Big Boss was, this is where he came from, it made sense. Then we had Peace Walker, which seemed like more stuff we didn't really need, but fine. So, like, the series had, like, been adding more to itself that was unnecessary. Like, 1, 2, and 3 were enough. Like, we could have stopped there, you know? And 2 was really interesting just because it was, like, so fucking oddly prophetic and, like, had such a bead on, like, where culture was going that you play it now, you're just like, oh, whoa.
This the memes did take over the world.
It's like, the fuck? This really was, like, on fucking point. It's kind of terrifying. And it evolved the gameplay in a good way. I don't know, the whole series is really great. But, like, 1 was just so pure. Like, it didn't have any crazy retconning things, obviously, because it was the first one. It didn't have to, like, deal with the baggage of, like, a series narrative that was kind of, like, getting overblown. And it didn't have to talk about, like, real life stuff too much. It was just a fantasy tactical story. It was very self-contained. I kind of feel the same way about that as I do with Mass Effect 1, in that it's self-contained in itself, that you can play that and nothing else and feel satisfied. Yeah. And it doesn't feel like there's too much baggage from being part of a series. It's just like a good product by itself.
All right. Well, next up on my list is Super Metroid. I fucking love Metroid. I love Zero Mission. I love Metroid 2. I love Super Metroid. Fusion, I have a little bit more sordid feelings about, but I still like it. And I'm almost done with Metroid Prime. I've almost, for the first time, beaten Metroid Prime.
Hell yeah.
I have 2 more artifacts to find, and then I think after that's just the final boss, right?
Yeah, the artifacts are like the kind of grindy part at the end before you get to
I already knew about the artifacts, so I've been picking up a lot of them throughout the game. So it wasn't like I had to go get every single one of them at the very end. And it gives you it tells you where they are.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Like, if you scan the statues, it's like, oh, go to the hall in Phendrana, and you're like, oh, let me find the room called Hall.
Yeah.
But
it's nowhere near as bad as the one in Echoes.
Yeah, I haven't.
You can make it through that.
I haven't played Metroid Prime. I haven't even like seen Metroid Prime 2. I don't know shit about it. But
it's not.
Just because I never wanted to touch
later.
it until I'd beaten the first one, and it's taken me over 15 years to finally beat the first one. But Super Metroid, it's really fascinating because like the first one I played, I got Prime and Zero Mission when they came out, like on the same day.
In Prime and Fusion.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
Prime and Fusion I got at the same time. I had never played any of the Metroids before because like I just hadn't heard of them, and they're all for consoles before my time.
Right.
But you know, I knew Samus from Smash, so of course I had to, and Nintendo Power was hyping it up. Loved Fusion at the time. Played through it probably like 4 times because it's a short ass game. And so like over the years, like I had come to appreciate Metroid through Fusion and Zero Mission and Prime, but I had never played Super Metroid until like 4 years ago, and it was fucking mind blowing because it's way bigger than the other games. Like, I mean, it's comparable to Prime. Like, it's like a 7.5 hour like. Whereas the other ones are like 4-hour games, this one's like it's like twice the size of most of the other Metroid games, and it has way more mechanics, just the most kick-ass like soundtrack, atmosphere, visual storytelling, like most engrossing narrative in the end because it has like a really memorable ending. It's just fucking sick. And it has the same... If you've played Metroid games, they all have the same kind of issues, i.e. there are going to be times where you get lost and frustrated. That's going to happen, because there's going to be something you have to do that is very esoteric, and you're going to take a while to figure it out, because the games... Basically what they do is they give you a whole bunch of tools, and then they're like... You can use these tools basically anywhere in the world, and they're all open-ended games. So, like, if you know what to do in a Metroid game, it can be pretty straightforward. You can play it in one quick go, knock everything out, do a speed run or whatever. There's lots of... in Super Metroid especially, there's lots of ways you can skip huge sections of the game or play it out of order if you know how to use, like, the Shine Spark and this other, you know, like, sort of hidden mechanics that the game has. But, nonetheless, when you're playing it for the first time and you don't know where anything is, it's a whole lot of using every tool on every surface in the game, you know? And that can be frustrating, but it's just such a cool world to be in. It has so much atmosphere, and the controls are really satisfying. So, like, just running around and shooting shit and jumping up stuff is fun in and of itself, and you always want to know what's going to be behind the next corner. And then you get to a new area, and it's, like, shocking how different a new place might be from the place you were before. Having played through most of Prime, I would say that it's comparable to Super Metroid. I mean, I think the atmosphere is even better in Prime just by the sheer force of being a 3D game and being having so much more you can explore and so much density of detail you can pack into every room and really bring it to life, and all the ability to scan shit and like learn all this deep lore about the world adds to it. However, Prime is even more frustrating than Super Metroid because of how infrequent save points are and how like fucking just going back and forth through the world in Super Metroid, while it could be frustrating because you were lost, it wasn't so much frustrating because you had actual difficulty traversing the world. Prime, it can be actually hard to just go from place to place. But between the two of them is probably my favorite. And like generally the Metroid style of game, I like pretty much any game that copies Metroid. Not so much the Metroidvania, as people call it, because I think that those Egavania games are much more action RPGs. They're not so much action platformers, whereas Metroid is more focused on exploration and, you know, every time you get a new power, going back through and doing everything over again. A great stripped down example of this is the game Knit, Knytt, which is an indie game that you can easily find for free. There's a few Knit games. There's Knit Stories, and I think there was one that was actually for sale as like a major release. But the Knit series is a pure platformer with no action. That's just basically Metroid without action. And it's really fun, and there's also games like Endeavor. There's a bunch of indie games that copy the Metroid formula. All of them are good. When you copy the Castlevania games, then leveling up and action and all that shit becomes a much bigger part of it, and those games kind of live and die on how satisfying it is to hit enemies,
sure.
You know? But they don't really have the great environmental storytelling, the great level design, the super memorable worlds. Like, when I play an Igavania, I feel like the actual, like, all the aesthetic is just totally incidental. Like, it's just there to look cool while you fight, but like the actual game is just mash attack button on enemies, you know? So yeah, pure Metroid's big fan. That's all I have to say about that. What do you got next?
Let's see. Ninja Gaiden for the Xbox.
Oh shit.
Yeah, this was like the Xbox game for me, more than Halo, more than MechAssault 2, even though that was really fucking close.
Mm-hmm.
Ninja Gaiden kicked your ass, and it was fucking sick. Even as someone who was a seasoned Devil May Cry player, by the time I played Ninja Gaiden, none of that fucking helped. If you go in playing Ninja Gaiden like Devil May Cry, you will get fucking steamrolled, as I did for like the first few hours, and like I was convinced the game sucked. Until you realize you have to play way more defensively, you know, because there's no block in Devil May Cry. There is a block in Ninja Gaiden, and it is essential. If you don't block, you're going to get fucking curb stomped.
It took me a while to get out of, like, the second room in Ninja Gaiden.
Dude, it's fucking hard. Like, the first mini-boss, like, not even the first boss, but, like, the dude on horseback will fucking wreck your shit.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, one of the big choke points right in the beginning for me was, like, you're in the village, it's burning down, and you get to a room, or like kind of like an area behind this building, and like the stuff collapses, and these two guys on horseback run around you shooting arrows at you, and you have to like position yourself in a way to get them, knock them both off the horses, and then fight them on foot. And it's really fucking hard, and it's just the mastery the game requires of you to do is insane. I don't even know how I beat this game. I beat this game like years ago, and I don't even think I could do it at this point. I'd have to like retrain myself, but like the level of satisfaction you get when playing this game well is insane, because it has like the best fucking progression in terms of that. So many games will start you off kind of weak and then you get strong. Ninja Gaiden, like, you already feel badass, and then you just keep getting more badass.
Yeah.
And that's really the way it should be done. Because, like, you have a couple cool sword combos, and they do a lot of great damage, and the hits feel great, but then you level up your sword, and then you get nunchucks, and then you get the fucking big spear, and then you get this big giant fucking sword. But then you also get counterattacks, and you get the Yazuna drop, and there's just so many more things you can start doing, and, like, the game really begins to open up. And there's just a point where you get into the zen of it, and like you can block and you parry everything and nobody can hit you. You get through an entire encounter where you've parried every single attack coming at you, and you just effortlessly destroy these things that were like fucking kicking your ass. But then you get to the next level, now there's fucking dinosaurs attacking you. You're just like, how the fuck do I fight the goddamn dinosaurs? This is totally... So it's always like ramping things up, and just the mechanics it presents are great. And you know, the guy, what's his name? Tonobu Itagaki was saying that, like, in most games, your character's designed to kill enemies. In Ninja Gaiden, the enemies are designed to kill you.
Right.
And they are.
How much of the appeal of that game do you think is just in the animations? Like, just moving your character looks so good.
There's a lot of it is that. Like, that game, it looked like a generation ahead of almost every other original Xbox game. And, like, it would look just as good as like launch PS3 and 360 titles for a long time.
It still does. Yeah, if you look at it, like you will be shocked to realize.
And it runs at 60 frames. And you're just like, how did they make the original Xbox do this? Because, like, you look at something like Dead or Alive 3 and 4 and stuff for the original Xbox, and that's a fighting game. It's 2 characters against, like, a bleak background. So they can dump all this detail into the characters. Like, that's why a lot of consoles launch with fighting games, because, like, they can really show off without too much overhead. They took that, like, graphics and then just put it in a full fucking game somehow by the end of the Xbox's lifespan. It's like, how did you do this?
It wasn't, like, a late game for the console either.
It was
around the middle, because they had Ninja Gaiden Black even before the Xbox was done.
It was like 2003, 2004, so it was getting near the end of it, because, like, that console cycle was really short. It was like 4 years before the new ones came out.
Is that all you have to say about Ninja Gaiden?
The bosses will fucking destroy you.
Yeah.
There's this one fucking boss that, like, flies around, and she's, like, big tits, and she'll fucking desecrate you, and I don't know how the fuck I ever beat it in my life.
I mean, you felt that way about Neo as well from Team Ninja, and we somehow have made it a lot farther than it initially anticipated.
It's hard. I wonder which game is harder, Neo or Ninja Gaiden. They're so different, it's hard to really compare them, but Ninja Gaiden's great. Just prepare to get your ass handed to you a lot. Blocking is very important.
Well, next up on my list is Super Meat Boy. And this is much like how a lot of the games I've chosen are very representative of, like, a type of game I like. I am a huge fan of, like, just straight up, like, difficult technical platformers. Like, where it's just 2D platformers where it's not so much about... I don't really like momentum-driven ones as much, like Sonic kind of shit. Like, not a huge fan of that style of game, or even Super Mario Bros. Like, I prefer very short level, quick respawn, that kind of, like one where you just basically bash your head against a problem until you solve it.
Sure.
And Super Meat Boy is the ultimate example of that. It's just, it's hard as fuck, and you play a level, and you quickly figure out what you need to do. It's just a matter of executing it. And executing it is often extremely hard, because you've got these controls where Super Meat Boy himself is very slippery, but the controls are extra tight. So it's all about, like, how am I going to sort of launch this piece of meat in such a way that it will go where I want it to go. It's almost like you're not even really controlling Meat Boy so much as just the force of momentum guiding Meat Boy. And you gotta do it. It's a fucking very straightforward game. If you look at it for 1 second, you know what it is. But it's got the controls just feel incredible because of the fact that a major part of the game is the long jump. That if you hold down the R button, you jump farther. And, like, there's this feeling when you, like, launch off of a wall and hold the R button and Meat Boy soars through the air. There's, like, this elasticity feeling to it that makes it always great. It's always just like, like, you have that feeling all the time. Like, you're really throwing this thing around and trying to make it work, and, you're constantly just a second away from death. Like, it's always, you have to do it just right, or else you will die. But, again, instant respawns, and, like, I would say Meat Boy pretty much inspired, like, about 1,000 million other indie games that have followed in its footsteps, a lot of which are good. The closer to Meat Boy they are, the more I will probably enjoy them. But, it's hard for me to say, like, when I played it, it was definitely one of my favorite games. In the time since then, I've played so many games that are similar. When I returned to Meat Boy, I've never sat down and just tried to beat it again. And I never beat it. I got to the second to last level, I think, and I could not get fucking past it because it gets so fucking hard. And then there's the hell levels, of which I've done less than half. Like, the game has an insane amount of content in it if you just keep going with it. Like, I think that's a big part of why I kind of respect it above a lot of the other platformers like it, is that most of them are just like, 4 hours of really tough shit and then it's over. Meat Boy is like, you could keep returning to this and bashing your head against it for quite some time, and it's so hard that you will not likely beat it unless you really get really good, and I've never gotten that good that I could there's also, like, time attack modes, tons of different characters you can play with and shit, so Yeah, I just think it's like kind of the most expansive hardcore platformer experience. I haven't played This Is the End yet though, so I think that's what it was called, right?
I think so.
Something like that. So I'm also curious about that one, but yeah, cool. Hardcore platformers, good. You got another ninja game coming up.
Yeah, the OG Ninja Suffering. Shinobi for the PS2.
Another game that you can watch Tom play through in its entirety on our playlist tab.
Takes a little bit more than 2.5 hours to get through this one.
But it was the birth of the Ninja Suffering meme, which we have on a t-shirt. If you have not looked at our t-shirts that are linked in the description of all of our videos, Ninja Suffering is down there, as well as Doomer and I Am Games. Anyway, talk about Shinobi.
It's so good.
Yes.
It's so pure. It's like almost the opposite of Ninja Gaiden. Whereas Ninja Gaiden gives you it's a hard game that presents you with tons of like gameplay that gets more complicated as you go. Shinobi gives you everything right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And the point of it isn't to do like flashy combos, it's to just master the 3 or 4 mechanics it gives you.
Yeah.
And the further you go in the game, the more imperative it is that you've mastered those mechanics or you're just going to get fucking curb stomped.
It's about being perfect. We did a whole video on it,
yeah.
in fact. It's like
the
most popular video we've got. So
except for the Tales of one.
Yeah. Well, that's only because people keep pointing out, like, oh, the Tales one has the most views. Aren't you going to do another one? I'm like, it only has the most views because I made, like, a main channel video promoting it. Like, I made a whole video on my big channel saying, go watch this Tales of video.
That's true.
None of that growth was organic, but the most organically popular video we have is
I'm glad there's appreciation for this game because it got fucking middling reviews at the time. It got like 7s. Everyone's like, it's okay. Because Devil May Cry had just come out and changed the game.
Yeah.
You know, so like it felt archaic compared to something like Devil May Cry. But like it is just a Sega Genesis game in 3D. The same way you play like Shinobi 3 or Revenge of Shinobi where like you just have a certain set of mechanics and you have to learn how to use them really well. This game is the exact same idea. It's aesthetically gorgeous.
It's less cheap than Shinobi 3 though.
Yeah, sure. I mean, most PS2 games are less cheap than Sega games, you know? Like, they still had the arcade DNA in them at the time, I suppose. But it's just so well put together, and just the fucking scarf is gorgeous. It's everything that I want to make in 3D. Like, it is my aesthetic, my ideal aesthetic, to make things that look like this.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's not pushing the PS2 to its limit or anything. It's aesthetically not
if you
great.
guys are familiar with Tom's game that he's making, Azumi game,
Yeah.
it's basically about a raccoon version of Shinobi.
I mean,
a female raccoon
this
version of
is
Shinobi.
the most like direct, probably aesthetic and just even gameplay wise influence, just because I think there's so many good ideas in this game of just like the way you have this meter that's constantly draining your soul, so you have to keep killing enemies to like keep it filled. So there's this constant pressure, and the way the game works is that ideally you're killing everything in one hit, because as you kill guys you build up your chain, and your sword keeps doing double damage for each corpse you have suspended in the air, and then there's these cool cutscenes where you ninja style you kill them all at once, and it's just a great sense of aesthetic combined with like a really solid gameplay loop that, despite the fact that it doesn't evolve or change throughout the entire game, never gets stale. It's just fucking, it's like the perfect arcade game.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll fucking kick your ass because it's insanely hard. But it's so fucking satisfying when you can kill every boss in the game in one hit by chaining the character, by killing all the ads.
If you do it just right.
It's fucking great. Watch the review if you haven't. It's
So here's one that I can't believe you didn't have in your 3x3. Because I'm looking at your 3x3 and where's the Doom?
I know.
How did you get away with no Doom?
I know. There's a bunch of games on here, honestly, that like I wanted on here but just didn't fit in the 3x3.
I'm amazed that Doom didn't make it.
I mean, where would it go? Like, all these games are just as important.
I'm surprised to hear that. I'm surprised. I just thought you cared about Doom more than...
I fucking love Doom, don't get me wrong, but...
So, okay, well, the one that's on my list, and this might even be kind of sacrilege, but it's the 2016 Doom.
I don't think that's sacrilege.
Because I chose it... It's also sort of a representative first-person shooter. I generally... I also like cover shooters because they're easy, and therefore I'm good at them, and I can play them on, like, the highest difficulty and feel cool. None of them would go on my top list, but between like Doom 2016 and Halo 1 and 2, like would be probably my top FPS game. So that gives you kind of an indication of what I like in FPS, which is more of the like running around an arena, like strategically moving, dodging bullets and enemies, and trying to like, you know, just like that feeling of 8 guys spawn in and you're like, oh fuck, but every time you kill one of them you feel like, okay, I'm a little closer to making this work, you know. And Doom 2016 is just so fucking fast and so visceral, and like it's really the speed of it that made it so much fun to me. Just the fact that you can fucking, you know, double jump around and fucking it's actually kind of comparable to Metroid Prime if it actually was a first-person shooter and not like a lock-on driven adventure game with single-stick controls. Like, it's got that same feeling of just constantly bouncing around and like really having to get out of the way of enemies and shit, but obviously a much better gameplay loop of action.
It's really interesting, Doom 2016, just because like it's Doom at the heart of it, but a lot of the like encounters where you get locked in, it all of a sudden plays like Quake 3 Arena, because you have the same power-ups that Quake 3 Arena has, like quad damage and all that kind of stuff, and they have the jump pads from a lot of the Quake 3 games, and there's just the movement and the verticality and the lock you in basically Quake 3 maps and like kill like 50 demons instead of trying to kill 4 other players, and it's a really interesting way of evolving the formula.
Yeah, I just love every time you get into a big shooting arena and you've got like a certain amount of ammo on you, and you're kind of like, okay, you know, let me figure out who all needs to die by the shotgun, who all needs to die by the other guns I've got, and it's just mega fucking satisfying every single time, every combat encounter. It's also like considerably long, which is nice, like in this case, because you know, with a Halo campaign, you can usually blast through it in a day, and they're a little bit more tactical. I like playing Halo multiplayer the most. With Doom 2016, it was like you really felt like you were climbing this, almost like you're climbing out of hell, you know, like every level it's even bigger and badder enemies, and you've got bigger and badder guns, and you have to, you know, the encounters, like, because a lot of levels will have, like, at the very end, you have to do, like, a really big gauntlet of enemies. And, like, that gauntlet keeps getting longer and with harder enemies. And so you have this sense of progression of, like, you have to get really fast and really good and really know your arsenal by the end if you want to beat all these huge enemy encounters. It was a really satisfying playthrough, and I went and even tried to 100% it. I don't recommend doing that. Finding all the secret Doom guys and shit is way less fun.
Yeah.
Because, like, enemies don't spawn back in, so it's just you running around a level back and forth looking for secrets. Not the way the game is meant to be played.
I mean, the problem is there's not even really any incentive to do that, because you don't get any gameplay rewards for doing that.
Right. I mean, there's just no, like, just play the game normally. It's fine. There's, you know, it didn't need to have all that shit, honestly, but because it's like, again, that's like very Metroid Prime-esque, but in Metroid Prime that feels like the point of the game, and like enemies will always spawn back in, so you're not just running through an empty location, although in Metroid Prime I kind of wish they did a little less of that. I don't know, I could go on about this, but yeah, Doom 2016, probably my favorite first person shooter currently. But it's not, it just edges out like Halo 1 and 2 multiplayer, you know, but that's because I haven't played those in a long time as well.
Yeah.
Alright, you've got another game on your list.
Yeah, Metal Gear Rising.
Hell yeah.
It's like the trifecta. Devil May Cry, Ninja Gaiden, and Metal Gear Rising are like the 3 big action games for me. This game just has so much fucking style and flash and just
rules of nature.
Yeah, the best soundtrack. It's fucking lit as shit. The best tutorial in any video game ever. We're just like, oh, the boss of Metal Gear Solid 2. It's the tutorial. Go fucking slice him in half with a katana. Sure, it makes sense. Fucking throw him into the stratosphere with your bare hands, even though he's 15 times your size. It's fine. Don't think about it. Yeah. Just fucking cut him in half. It's sick. Slice him open. And it just keeps going. It's just the fucking pure adrenaline in video game form. And you have a sick parry system. It's cheesy as fuck. The game's so good, fucking Trump stole Make America Great Again from it, alright?
Yeah.
Senator Armstrong was the original MAGA boy. It's perfect. It's perfect, it's cheesy.
Nano Machine, son.
It's so good, you know? Just like fucking, my sword was a tool of justice, but this isn't my sword. And you just fucking have this. Oh, it's so fucking sick. It's the best.
I like to think of Metal Gear Rising as kind of the ultimate Platinum game, because like Platinum games are all about the intense combat, crazy combos, like running around, flashy action shit. And Metal Gear Rising is just the one that's the most over the top, and kind of feels like the point. Well, I don't know if it's more over the top than Bayonetta, but like in terms of the feeling of combat, it's even more like just visceral and fucking crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Bayonetta's great too, because I haven't played through Bayonetta 2 yet. I'm playing through Bayonetta 1. The combat in that game is crazy and shit too, but I feel like, I don't know, Metal Gear Rising really like leans into it a lot more.
Yeah.
I feel just like the whole game feels like designed to just be this crazy and insane shit. And maybe also it kind of also works because like it's in the Metal Gear Solid world, which is usually more grounded, but like we're like 20 more years in the future, so now like everything's just totally fucked.
Yeah.
And it's just like now we just have robot guys everywhere, and this is just the way things are.
Yeah.
And Raiden's is like somehow become a badass, and it's fucking nuts. It's just so fucking fun to play.
It's another short one too.
Yeah, you can power through it pretty quickly.
Just tear things up for 4 hours, basically.
It doesn't outstay its welcome, which is really, really important. And there's a couple difficulty levels, so you can keep cranking that up as you get better.
All of these action games, the skill ceilings are insanely high.
Yeah, I mean the VR missions in the game are also great, just because like the challenges you have to do there are really difficult. I'd say those are much harder than the main campaign, trying to get all the VR stuff done. Yeah, it's just fucking really satisfying, and it had some DLC that was good too. If you want to play as the Blade Wolf guy, or you can play as Jetstream Sam. Good fucking shit.
All right, well, the last game on my list, I didn't want to put I didn't want to put Melee on here, even though it probably deserves to be, but like I just don't want to talk about Smash anymore.
Can't give Jalen Harris any ammo.
But the last game on my list is Chantilly's. This one I chose to represent all the indie games that I love. Chantilly's is what I would describe as a single A game or something. Maybe even less. It's kind of just an indie game, but it's one that has 3D environments, but the characters are sprites, which is a style that I think you see more on like the Vita. But it's a PC game from the same people who made Recettear. And basically, it's just a very straightforward action RPG. But what's interesting about it is that your character sprite like stands in the center of your screen, and rather than you moving your character around the environment, it's more like you move the environment around your character. Not like literally, but like you can kind of steer your character with the R and L buttons. So like if you want to play this game, you can just kind of hold forward and just steer your character around, and they'll turn and you through the environments. And
it's like the nature of having the 2D on 3D.
Yeah, and it makes for a very interesting control scheme that I found very satisfying. And just running around and smacking shit with your little sword is hella fun in this game. And it's got, a very basic, like, action RPG gameplay loop. Hit enemies, collect these. They drop these little gems that you can use, like, you cast spells with these gems, but, like, there's 4 different colors, and depending on what order you pick them up in, like, let's say you pick up 3 red gems, you'll have 3 different levels of fireball you can use. But if you were to pick up, like, a red, a blue, and a yellow, you would just use, a small fireball, a small water, a small electricity, as opposed to, like, being able to use a big fireball kind of thing. So that's, like, just a little bit of on-the-fly mechanical shake-up. It's very straightforward, but it has just enough variety of levels, just enough to do in the levels. I really love the aesthetic of the game. You play as a cute little girl and her older sister, who, like, I think was turned into a fairy or something, and you're trying to lift a curse. I don't remember exactly. It's been a few years since I played it, but, like, I just love charming indie games that are based on not so much having the most unique mechanic, but like just a very satisfying play style that, like, they're not about either trying to copy something that's already popular or trying to like be the most creative thing in the whole world. It's just like, hey, here's a style of gameplay that would be fun. Let's see what we can do with it. And I feel like they fleshed it out to enough of an extent that, you know, you get like a 20-hour game out of it. I think I beat it to 100% even. I did a video on it. Go look up Digibro Chantilly's. I've got a whole video that's like 18 minutes long talking about the game. But it's super underrated. It was not appreciated really at all when it came out. Like the only other reviews of the game I found were pretty negative about it. And I don't know why. I think just because they didn't give enough of a shit. But I fucking loved it, and all the stuff by that company is great. Easy Game Station. I never actually beat Recetier, or else that might be on the list too. But I also aside from representing indie games, it also just represents any simplistic action RPG, because I love action RPGs. I love the gameplay loop of just whacking things and leveling up. And you know, obviously the Souls games are something kind of similar, but they have just way more stacked on top of that. But like in a way, having all that extra shit is more intimidating to me. And a game that is super intimidating yet kind of close to the same gameplay loop as Chantilly's is Neo. Like I would actually compare it like the general, like if you wanted like a Neo to be as easy and inviting as possible and it's like stripped down as possible, Chantilly's would be the same kind of type of game. But Neo, I also really love that game. That game could potentially crack my list, but man, I've only played like 15 hours of that 80-hour monstrosity. So, but like, you know, I like it when the games I don't require my games to be a huge challenge. I don't require it to push me to the absolute limit. I just want it to be satisfying and fun. And if it has a nice aesthetic, then
a lot of my favorite games on here, the action games, are all like punishingly hard. I'd still love them if they were simple. Like I like DMC Devil May Cry, and that's a much easier game.
Right.
I actually probably enjoy it more than a lot of other action games that are quote unquote better and harder. Yeah. It's another game that almost made it on my list. This last slot for me, there were so many games I wanted to put on here. It was like Pokemon Gold and Silver.
I was very tempted to put just like Pokemon as a blanket on here. I don't know, like none of the games individually I think I enjoy as much as the games I put on my list.
Like Doom was obviously another one, DMC Devil May Cry, Halo. There's so many like fucking like great games. But the game I ended up choosing was one you'll probably be upset about, is Metroid Fusion.
I'm not upset. I don't dislike Metroid Fusion. My biggest problems with Metroid Fusion is that it's way more action oriented and a lot less exploration oriented, where it kind of just it tells you where to go. And you go there, and there's like lots of mini bosses, lots of fighting. I think my main frustration with the game, because I loved it when I was a kid, I played through it multiple times. When I went back and tried to play all the Metroids in a row, like 5 years ago, this is when I finally played Super Metroid. When I got to Metroid Fusion, by the way, it has a great control scheme. Like Zero Mission and Fusion have the best controls of any of the Metroids. Because in Super Metroid, the biggest problem is you have to like go through every single power up like in order to use any of it. Like you have to like press the Y button like 4 times to get to the thing you want. In any case, Fusion, I tried to play it on hard mode. And if you try to play it on hard mode, the bosses get really fucking hard. And there's this spider named Yakuza. You know who I'm talking about? The big spider boss? Mm-hmm. I could not fucking beat him on hard mode. And like you have to run back like 3 minutes to get to him. Like you have to run through this whole tunnel. I think I fought him like almost 20 times and couldn't beat it. And I don't know if I was just underpowered or what, but like he just does so much fucking damage, and he can like stun lock you into a loop where he keeps like, because he'll grab you and then like spit you out, and then he can grab you again like the second you recover. And it was so fucking frustrating that I was just like, fuck this game, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, Fusion was my first Metroid game because I got it right near when it came out. I didn't have a GameCube, so I couldn't get Prime, and again, just like you, didn't have a Super Nintendo. There was nothing on N64 for Metroid, so like it was just not in my wheelhouse until I was able to get Fusion. And it's one of those games that again really left an impact because I was not expecting it. I just remember turning it on for the first time, and like the fucking theme song starts. It's like this dark kind of like ambience, and just like this is coming out of a Game Boy, and it feels like ominous as fuck. And like this is a Nintendo game. I didn't know what to expect. I figured it would kind of be something just like that's a space adventure, and I'm playing as a girl, whatever. But like it just fucking filled you with dread, and like I'm this like 16-year-old kid, and like my Game Boy Advance is making me feel uncomfortable, and like it just set the tone perfectly. And from that point on, it was just like just Dread, really, because it was originally called Metroid, or the sequel was supposed to be called Metroid Dread. Like that's really? Just the feeling that it inspires in you, because like you're being constantly hunted by the SAX and all this kind of shit, and like you're always on like the edge of your seat because you don't know when it's going to pop up next.
I think basically everyone agrees that is the most memorable thing about Fusion.
It's so fucking cool.
Whenever you see it, you're like, oh, fuck!
And like it didn't even have the full impact for me at the time, because like the great thing about the SAX is that it's Samus as you remember her, you know, and like so you're being hunted by like who you expect to be, because in this game you're way weaker, and like you're basically fucked up from this parasitic virus, and you in your prime is the clone that is hunting you. And so like even as when I first played it, I got it, but I didn't really get it because I hadn't played any of their Metroid games, so that kind of aspect was kind of lost on me. Going back and playing it again, it's much more impactful, because I'm like, oh yeah, totally makes sense now.
I need to play it again with on normal mode again.
It's really, I really liked the narrative stuff. I liked the fact that like it's really frustrating that no new Metroid game has taken place after, which is why I'm like one of those like lifers. I'm like, I want Metroid Dread to come out, because I want to know more about this like Samus after this fact, because she's part Metroid now, which I thought was really interesting. So she's weak to ice, and like you can't have an ice beam in the game. That's and there's tons of really interesting shit like that. So you have to like get these ice missiles that work differently, and it changed a lot of the core functions of the game, and which is why I was really excited at the end of Metroid Samus Returns. The after credit scene has the X parasites coming down to the planet and fucking shit up. I'm just like, are we finally going to get Metroid Dread? It's been fucking 17 years. Are we finally getting back on this goddamn train? We probably aren't. But it would be nice, because I would love to see more.
Wait. Where does that happen?
At the end credit scene after the end of Metroid Samus Returns, which is the 3DS game. They have a cutscene of like some of the enemies just walking around. Then it gets infected by X parasites. That's
crazy. I still haven't played that game yet. But
it's fucking great. That's another really good one. I like the counter mechanic they added in that and stuff. It's a good one.
That was the thing, is that I couldn't get used to that because it's so different from what I'm used to from Metroid, that I was like, I kept having, like, I just was constantly getting hit and not doing the counter correctly, but I'll do it eventually. Almost done with Prime, so I'm excited to go back.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get on.
We got to get Metroid Fusion hooked up to Prime, because then you can play through it in the Fusion suit, which would be cool.
Wait, you can do Prime in the Fusion suit?
Yeah.
What the fuck? Yeah. I must have heard that at some point, but I never did it.
Yeah, they linked up. And like that was another thing. Like if you get the amiibo for Samus Returns, you can play Samus Returns in the Fusion suit. So I'm just like, the Fusion shit's coming back. It's gotta be in the pipe somewhere. The dream's not dead. Because there was like a message in Metroid Prime 2 Echoes talking about Project Dread, which I guess was like, supposedly people were thinking was the DS sequel to Metroid Fusion. It never came about. And ever since then, I've been waiting patiently, because I just think the lore and how they changed everything was really cool, because now she's part Metroid.
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, considering the history of the series, that's a huge thing.
Among the main 4 Metroid games, there is like a surprisingly coherent narrative. Like it's very simple, but it all feeds into each other. It's like they each are a very logical sequel to the previous, whereas like Other M attempts to fill in the backstory and just ruins it, and it's better to just consider non-canon.
Yeah.
Because it especially fucks with Fusion's story, because like she tells you about this commanding officer who she admired, and like that's who the guy is in Other M, and you're suddenly like, wow, this story now sucks.
Yeah.
And
which is why I haven't played it, and I don't plan on it.
Don't do it. It's not worth it. All right, everybody. Well, those are each of our top 9 favorite games. Should have 3x3s on screen the whole time, so you would have already known what they were going to be.
You should not be lazy and just fade them in one at a time.
Oh god, that would take so long.
Yeah.
I mean, then what will the thumbnail be? What should the thumbnail be?
A blank 3x3 with question marks? I don't
No,
fucking know.
no. I'm just gonna make it the 2 3x3s next to each other. Fuck
Weak.
it. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. I hope that this gave you some insight into what kind of gamers we are. If it wasn't already obvious, but yeah. See you around. Be the games you want to see. I am Games.
And I'm also Games.
Signing out.